As many graduating high schoolers do in their summer prior to college, I decided to set some personal goals that would create good habits going into my freshman year. My main goal was to get into better shape by the end of summer. So I got myself a gym membership and got to work on gaining muscle. At the beginning of the summer, I thought that just going to the gym every day and lifting as much weight as possible 1 or 2 times before moving on to the next exercise would allow me to achieve results. Unfortunately, this did nothing but make me sore every time I woke up. Abandoning the idea that what I was doing was a good thing, I purchased a fitness app for my phone. This app, named Full Fitness, provides the user with a seemingly endless amount of exercises that stretches the target everything from shoulders to calves. It also gives the user the ability to create workouts and includes preset workouts for people with different goals. I found a workout entitled Muscle Building Routine and eagerly clicked on it to see what it could do for me. I was surprised to see that there were only 4 days of workouts in the routine, instead of the 7 that I had anticipated. The description of the workout provided me an answer as to why. It read, muscle cells, as many studies have shown, grow through the rest phase after a workout, not during the workout itself. Working out helps to stimulate your body, but rest in between is just as important as muscle development. Like muscle cells, we as people must also have a time to relax and escape our busy lives. This is the original idea of the Sabbath day. The 7th day during which God rested after creating the world should be also a day that we give to Him, a day to go to church, reflect, and rest after a busy week. In ancient times, this was not just common practice, it was the law. No work was to be done on the Sabbath, period. Which brings us to today's gospel. Jesus is found preaching at a synagogue when a crippled woman appears. Noticing her, Jesus calls her over and cures her of her ailment, a relatively simple procedure by his standards. Yet for performing this miracle, he is scolded by the leader of the synagogue, who argues that he is a hypocrite for doing work on the Sabbath. Why is this a big deal? Jesus had performed miracles before and been immediately praised for them. So why did the day on which he performed the act matter? The way the leader of the synagogue interpreted the law, the Sabbath was a day reserved strictly for rest. No work should be done, even if that work was healing a woman who had been crippled for 18 years. So, if this was the case and Jesus knew that what he was doing would create tension, then why did he do it in the first place? Why not wait until the next day to heal the woman? Why the Sabbath? Was Jesus simply trying to lash out against the synagogue and its beliefs? Or was it something more than that inspired him to act? Jesus was attempting to teach the community a lesson about the Sabbath day. If the Sabbath was strictly rest, then they all were guilty of performing work simply by caring for their animals, something the Lord makes very clear to the audience. If the laws which the leader of the synagogue believed in still applied today, think of what the world would be like on Sundays. Doctors and hospitals would serve no purpose on Sunday, since it would be illegal for them to perform any type of procedure, even if it meant the difference between life and death for a patient. You would basically be forced to go to church in the morning, then return home and sit for the rest of the day. Going outside and watering the lawn or taking out the trash could get you arrested. The people who broke the law would be able to do whatever they wanted to, since the only way for the police to stop them would be to break the law themselves. The world in general would be less productive and more dangerous. Jesus is also attempting to convey the purpose of laws to the synagogue. Where would we be today without laws? A recent movie entitled The Purge attempts to explore that concept. In it, America has a new revolution, and for one night a year, the government lifts all laws and allows the country to purge themselves of their criminal behaviors. While this does provide some positive attributes to society, such as lower crime rates overall and less unemployment, it becomes known as the movie goes on that this is not a positive event. The homeless and poor are often exploited and usually murdered by strange cults of affluential members of society who think that by doing this the world becomes a better place. The concept of the movie is scary to think about and provides us with an idea of what it would be like without laws to abide by. However, that is not to say that laws should be taken out of context, as the synagogue leader in the gospel found out the hard way. They all serve a purpose and can all be broken down to a simple statement. Love your God and your neighbors as you would yourself. Don't kill because you wouldn't want anyone to kill you. Don't steal because you wouldn't want anyone to steal from you. All 10 of the original commandments can be broken down in this way. In some ways, this is about laws, but as I said earlier, this gospel is truly about the Sabbath. What is it for? Is it meant to be a day of rest and praise of God, or is it something more than that? There are actually two different interpretations of the Sabbath itself. The most well-known is what was mentioned earlier, where we as God's children should rest as he did on the seventh day. The other interpretation comes up in one of the original 10 commandments. This one states that while the Sabbath should be observed as a day of rest, it should also be a day of freedom, a day of release from bondage. This second interpretation of the Sabbath is obviously the one that Jesus is attempting to tap into in the gospel. Jesus states that the woman was being bound by Satan in her ailment, and therefore she should be freed of that bondage. Since the Sabbath is a day of release from bondage, he is not performing work as the synagogue leader considers it, but rather carrying out a duty on the Sabbath day. This concept of bondage is an interesting one. Sometimes our obligation to go to church can seem like bondage. Depending on what way you look at it, this could be the case. Some may come to church because they feel forced to. They think that going to church is going to guarantee their happy existence after this life has come to an end. But that is not the right reason to come to church. If that is the case, then it is indeed bondage and counterproductive to the Sabbath day itself. Most of us, I believe, are not like that. I think that most of us get a similar feeling that I get when I walk into the sanctuary. A feeling of cleansing, a feeling of comfort, and a feeling of freedom. Here in the sanctuary is a place that we go once a week to forget that everything in our lives and remember that we are loved by our Lord. And every time I walk out of the sanctuary, I feel like a new person. There's a reason why the place where we gather for service is called the sanctuary. Sanctuary is defined as a place of refuge or asylum. For us, this is exactly what church should be, a refuge where we are not threatened or anxious in any way, a place where we feel safe and secure. One of the most powerful trips I have been on is the annual Invitation to Service trip that the youth group goes to. I have been there 2 years, and both times I came out of it a changed person. This trip takes place in Southern California, at the Samuelson Chapel at California Lutheran University. Most of the trip revolves around exploring your faith, what it means to you, and what is God calling you to do. This is done through a combination of keynote speakers, small group discussions, and activities. For me, though, the most powerful part of the entire thing are call stories. Here, various people come up and basically talk a bit about themselves, specifically how God has called to them and influenced major life decisions. On the last evening of the retreat, there's a candlelit service in which the mic is open for everyone and anyone to come and talk about how God is calling to them. The first time I went to this, I did not expect many people to go up and speak. Going up on stage and talking to relative strangers about some of the more personal details of your life takes a huge amount of courage, after all. However, both times I have been there, over half of the kids, myself included, have walked up to that mic and told their call story. This is the epitome of what I believe church should be. A place where you are comfortable enough to go up in front of the whole congregation and tell some of the most personal stories you have without the fear of being ridiculed. Church should be a place where you are free from the judgments that can accompany many of the other different settings in today's world. If this is the case, and this is the reason why we go to church, then it is not bondage at all. It is a release. Since I have agreed to do this sermon, many people have asked me why exactly I chose to just get up and preach in front of the congregation, and I really couldn't give them an answer. I thought for a while that I was just doing this for the sake of doing it, because not many people get the opportunity to do something like this. But looking over this gospel and this idea of bondage and release, I think I have found an answer. I'm doing it because for me, preaching a sermon is a type of release. It is proof that this is indeed a sanctuary. Where else would this type of opportunity be given to me? This is exactly what Jesus was trying to say by healing the woman. We should not feel bound by anything on the Sabbath. It should be a day to be free of all worry and judgment. Not only that, but it is our duty as members of the church to help free people who may be bound on this day as well. Everywhere we go, we see people who are bound by something. Poverty, illness, grief, all of these are binders that hold us from being the best we can be. Now, does this mean we should go out and find all of these people on Sundays and help every single one of them? We can try, but it would be near impossible, since it would take much too long and would require much more manpower than we are capable of producing. But maybe we know someone who is going through a life struggle, someone whose family member is ill or deceased, or someone who is having trouble financially. Would today not be the perfect day to call them and offer a person to talk to? Someone who they can trust to not pass judgment on them? To offer them consolation is a small act, but will help them in being free of the bonds that hold them down. And like Jesus helped the woman, we too can help them overcome and stand up straight.